welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Or, I might show up at your door. I'm just here to share some creepy stories, so sit back and enjoy. Disclaimer: the content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. I barely noticed the emergency alert at first. The robotic voice crackled through my radio just as I was turning onto Sycamore Street. More background noise than anything else. It wasn't a weather warning. No storm was coming. No wildfire was threatening to swallow the town. But something about the tone made my fingers tighten around the steering wheel. Emergency alert. From this point forward, avoid the streets at dusk. This is not a test. That was it. No explanation, no follow-up. Just a flat, mechanical command. I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face. It was probably some kind of public safety thing, maybe related to crime, maybe a prank. I had bigger things to worry about. 12 hours into my shift, my head was pounding, my back ached, and all I wanted was to make it home without having to deal with another drunk teenager or panicked heart attack victim. The sun hung low in the sky, throwing long golden streaks across the pavement. Dusk. I turned onto my street and was about to pull into my driveway when my radio buzzed again. Dispatch to Unit 3. Ethan, you still out? I sighed again but grabbed the receiver. Yeah, I'm here. We've got a motorist stranded on Oakwood. Car broke down. Closest tow is an hour out and no patrols are free. Can you swing by? I hesitated. A broken down car wasn't exactly an emergency, but Oakwood wasn't far. And if it was some old woman or a teenager freaking out, I'd feel like a real asshole ignoring it. Yeah, I'll check it out. Thanks, Ethan. And, did you hear that emergency alert just now? I frowned at the change in her voice. Yeah, weird, right? Real weird, she murmured. You be careful, okay? The radio cut off. I turned my ambulance back toward downtown. The sunset now dipping below the rooftops, dragging shadows with it. Oakwood was nearly deserted when I pulled up to the reported location. A single car sat on the side of the road, its hazard lights blinking weakly. The street lights flickered as if they couldn't quite decide whether to turn on or not. I stepped out and scanned the area. No one in sight. Hello, I called, approaching the car. The driver's door was open, but the inside was empty. No sign of a driver, no signs of struggle, just an abandoned vehicle. I checked the license plate. Local. Maybe they went to find help? Then I noticed the phone on the driver's seat. The screen was cracked. The last thing on it, a half-typed message. Something's out here. I see. The text ended there. I exhaled sharply, glancing up and down the street. A creeping unease settled over me. I'd seen plenty of strange things working emergency services, but this was off. Something rustled nearby. I turned sharply toward the alley next to the car, my pulse quickening. The sun was nearly gone now, and the streetlights still weren't turning on properly, flickering like dying candles. A voice crackled over my radio. Too late. I froze. The voice wasn't dispatch. Who is this? I said, gripping the receiver. No response. Just static. The air felt wrong, like the temperature had dropped a few degrees in the last minute. I took a step back toward my ambulance, suddenly aware of how empty the street was. The shops were all closed, the windows dark. Even the distant sounds of traffic seemed muffled. I wasn't alone. The feeling was impossible to shake. I turned back toward the abandoned car, and for a split second, I thought I saw something move in the reflection of the side mirror. Not a person, not an animal, just movement. The streetlight above me buzzed loudly and burst, raining sparks onto the pavement. That was enough. I climbed into my ambulance and slammed the door shut, locking it. My fingers fumbled for the radio. Dispatch. I've got an abandoned vehicle at Oakwood. No sign of the driver. Possible missing person. Silence. Then, if you are outside at dusk, do not run. Do not speak. It wasn't dispatch. I stared at the radio, heart hammering. The same robotic voice from the earlier emergency alert. Something shifted in my peripheral vision. A shape at the far end of the street. Standing. Still. I turned my headlights on, but the light barely seemed to touch it. My breath caught in my throat. No, not possible. I threw the ambulance into gear and pulled away fast, tires screeching against the asphalt. I didn't look back. The streets were too empty as I drove. No pedestrians, no other cars, just my own reflection in the ambulance windows, my own ragged breathing. When I finally made it home, I bolted the door behind me and turned on every light in the house. My phone buzzed with another emergency alert. Avoid the streets at dusk. If you are outside, do not run. Do not speak. Do not look at them. I shut the curtains, and I waited for sunrise. I barely slept. Even after locking every door and turning on every light in the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind against the window made my heart pound. I left the emergency alert open on my phone screen, reading the words over and over. Avoid the streets at dusk. If you are outside, do not run. Do not speak. Do not look at them. I kept thinking about the figure I'd seen at the end of the street, the way my headlights barely touched it, the silence that followed. It wasn't normal. At some point, exhaustion won out, and I drifted into a restless sleep. I woke just after dawn, my phone vibrating on the nightstand. A text from dispatch. You okay? Radio was acting weird last night. I hesitated before responding. Yeah, just had a weird call. Abandoned car on Oakwood. Driver missing. A few seconds passed before the typing bubbles appeared. Another one? That's the third in 2 days. Cold knot formed in my stomach. I threw the covers off and got dressed, my mind racing. If more people were disappearing, why wasn't anyone talking about it? Why weren't there news reports? The emergency alert was the only official warning, but it barely said anything. As I grabbed my keys, I peeked through the blinds. The street looked normal. The sun was bright, the sky clear. No flickering streetlights, no shadowy figures, just a quiet, empty neighborhood. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself I was going to work like any other day. I was wrong. The station felt off the moment I walked in. Normally, mornings were a mess of ringing phones, dispatch chatter, and half-awake EMTs griping about the night shift. But today it was quiet, too quiet. I spotted my partner, Devin, sitting at the back, staring at his coffee like it held the meaning of life. You look like hell, I said, dropping into the chair across from him. He didn't laugh, didn't even look up, just muttered, Did you get the alert? I frowned. Yeah, he exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over his face. I was out last night when it happened. Dropped off a patient at St. Mary's and took the long way home. Figured I'd stop at the gas station, grab something to eat. His fingers tightened around his coffee cup. There was a guy at the pump when I pulled in, just standing there, not moving. I thought he was drunk or something, but then Devin trailed off, swallowing hard. The lights flickered, and when they came back on, he was closer. I sat up straighter. Closer, he nodded. I didn't see him move. He was just there, standing in the same position but closer, like a bad jump cut in a movie. A shiver ran down my spine. I left, just got in my rig and drove, Devin said. Didn't look back. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I could still see the figure from last night in my mind. The way the streetlights flickered. The voice over the radio whispering, Too late, something's happening, I said finally. Devin nodded. And no one's talking about it. Our first call of the day came in just after 9 a.m. A missing person report. A woman claimed her husband had gone out to grab something from the car around dusk and never came back. His keys were still on the driveway. The car door was wide open. No signs of a struggle. No footprints leading away. Just gone. The cops barely looked interested when we got there. One of them, Officer Ruiz, just shrugged and said, People leave all the time. The woman was crying. He didn't just leave. His shoes are still inside. His wallet. He was just going to the car. Ruiz gave us a look like, see what I mean? Before taking her statement, Devin and I exchanged uneasy glances. Something was wrong with this town. By midday, more reports started coming in. A store owner on Main Street swore his delivery driver never came back from unloading the truck. The guy's clipboard was still on the ground, the back of the truck open. The security cameras glitched at the exact moment he vanished. A teenager called 911, hysterical, saying his older brother walked to the corner store last night and never came home. His phone was still charging on the nightstand. Another emergency alert buzzed through our phones. Remain indoors at dusk. If you are outside, do not respond to voices calling your name. I showed it to Devin and his face went pale. What the hell does that mean? He whispered. I didn't know. That evening, I got a call from Mark, a nurse I knew at St. Mary's. His voice was shaking. Ethan, you still at the station? Yeah. What's going on? Something's wrong with the security footage. You need to see this. I drove over as fast as I could. Mark met me at the ER entrance, his face drawn and pale. He led me to a back room where the hospital's security monitors flickered. He rewound the footage to last night. A timestamp in the corner read 6:52 p.m. The hospital entrance was visible, well lit. People walked in and out. Then the lights flickered. When they came back, 3 people were gone. Not walking away, not running, just gone. Mark paused the video. No one remembers them. His voice was barely above a whisper. Their names aren't in the system. Their charts are gone. It's like they were never here. I stared at the screen, my skin crawling. Ethan, Mark said, swallowing hard. I think we're next. That night, as I drove home, another emergency alert came through. Do not look outside at dusk. They are watching. My headlights flickered, and in the distance, at the edge of the streetlight's glow, something was standing there, watching, waiting. I didn't sleep again. After what I saw on the hospital security footage, I knew something was horribly wrong. People were disappearing, not running away, not being kidnapped, just gone, like they had never existed in the first place, and no one was talking about it. I sat in my dark living room, phone clutched in my hand, reading over the emergency alerts again. Avoid the streets at dusk. If you are outside, do not run. Do not speak. Do not respond to voices calling your name. Do not look outside at dusk. They are watching. Who was they? My mind kept replaying last night. How my headlights barely touched the figure on the street. How my radio whispered, too late. I thought about Devin's story. How the man at the gas station moved without moving. And now this, people erased from reality. At some point, exhaustion caught up with me, and I dozed off on the couch. When I woke, my phone was buzzing. Dispatch. I answered groggily. Yeah, Ethan, we've got a problem. I arrived at the station to find Devin pacing outside, his face pale. What happened? I asked. He rubbed his hands over his face. Ethan, the night shift EMTs. They're gone. I froze. What? They were supposed to check in this morning. They never did. Their ambulances are still here. Their gear is still here. But they're gone. I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. I stepped inside the station, and the first thing I noticed was the silence. No chatter. No ringing phones. Just emptiness. The lockers of the night shift crew were open. Their radios were still charging. Coffee cups sat half-empty on the counter. It was like they had vanished mid-shift. The worst part? No one was looking for them. I pulled out my phone and checked the department roster. Their names weren't there. No employee records. No schedules. No history of them ever working here. I looked at Devin. They're being erased. He nodded, jaw tight. Just then, another emergency alert came through. Stay inside. If you are outside, do not acknowledge movement in the dark. A chill ran down my spine. I turned to Devin. We need to find out what's happening before we disappear too. We started with the missing driver from Oakwood. I still remembered the car, the open door, the unfinished text message. It was the first real proof I had that something was wrong. Devin and I drove back to the scene in my ambulance. The sun was high in the sky, a false sense of security settling over us. The car was still there, but something was different. I parked and we stepped out cautiously. The vehicle looked exactly the same position, same hazard lights flashing weakly. But the driver's seat was gone. Not just empty, gone. Like someone had cut it out of the car. Devin stepped closer. What the hell? I leaned in and saw something scratched into the dashboard. Deep, jagged letters. They see you. My blood ran cold. Devin exhaled sharply. Ethan, look. He pointed at the ground. Footprints, not leading to the car, leading away from it. They stopped a few feet down the road. Just stopped. Like the person had been plucked out of existence. The back of my neck prickled. I suddenly felt exposed. I glanced at my watch. 5:43 p.m. Dusk was coming. We need to go, I said, but as I turned back to the ambulance, the radio crackled. A voice, distorted and wrong, whispered, Ethan. My blood turned to ice. Get in the ambulance, I said, voice low. Devin hesitated. What? Get in the ambulance? He must have heard the urgency in my voice, because he didn't argue. As soon as we slammed the doors shut, I hit the gas. In the rearview mirror, I saw something standing in the middle of the road. It wasn't there when we arrived. It wasn't moving. It was just watching. Back at the station, we locked the doors and closed every window. Devin paced, running his hands through his hair. What the hell is happening, man? I shook my head. I don't know, but whatever it is, it's spreading. My phone buzzed again. Another alert. If you are outside at dusk, do not run. Do not hide. Stay absolutely still. I read the words over and over, heart pounding. Why? Devin asked. Why not run? I didn't know, but I had a feeling we didn't want to find out. Just then, the power flickered. The room darkened for half a second. When the lights came back, one of the chairs was missing. Devin and I stared. We hadn't looked away for more than a second, and it was gone. The station felt wrong now, like something had shifted. The door rattled. We both froze. The blinds were closed, but I felt something standing just outside. Then, a knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps. We didn't move. Another knock. Then, Ethan, I sucked in a sharp breath. It was my own voice, muffled, distorted, coming from the other side of the door. Devin looked at me, his face pale. I shook my head violently. Do not respond to voices calling your name. We stayed absolutely still. The knocking stopped. Silence stretched. Then the door handle turned. The power cut out completely. For a split second, the room was pitch black. And in that moment, I felt it. Something standing right behind me. The darkness lasted only a second. But in that second, I felt it. Presence. Cold air brushed the back of my neck, like something standing inches away. Watching. Waiting. Then the power flickered back on. I spun around, nothing there. Devin was pressed against the wall, his chest rising and falling in shallow, panicked breaths. His wide eyes met mine. Neither of us spoke. The station door was still locked, the windows still shut, but something had been inside. I reached for my radio with shaking hands. Dispatch. This is Ethan. We need an immediate response at the station. Possible. Static. No voice, no reply, just silence. Devin swallowed hard. We need to get out of here. I hesitated. Go where? He didn't have an answer. We stayed locked in the station for another hour, barely speaking, barely moving. I checked my phone compulsively, waiting for the next emergency alert. Nothing. Outside, the last of the sunlight faded. I checked my watch. 6:42 p.m. Almost dusk. We need answers, I muttered. Devin gave me a tired look. And where do you plan on getting those? I hesitated, then pulled up my phone contacts. Scrolled until I found Mark's number, the nurse from St. Mary's, the only person besides Devin who seemed to notice what was happening. I hit dial. It rang. Once, twice, then, Ethan. His voice was shaky, weak. Mark, we need to talk. Where are you? Silence. Then a whisper. They're watching me. A chill crawled up my spine. Where are you? I repeated. St. Mary's, East Wing, room 209. The line cut out. I stared at my phone. 209 was an empty room. I knew that because I'd been there a dozen times. It was used for storage, no patients, no staff. Devin frowned. That didn't sound like a guy who's doing well. I grabbed my keys. We're going. We took my ambulance to St. Mary's Hospital. It was eerily quiet when we pulled up. The usual crowd of ER patients, nurses, and doctors were nowhere to be seen. The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a dimly lit hallway. A single nurse sat at the front desk, her back to us. Something about the way she sat, completely still, too rigid, made the hairs on my arms rise. Devin nudged me. "Ethan, something's wrong." I forced myself to step forward. "Hey, we're looking for Mark." No response. She didn't even twitch. I stepped closer. My boots scuffed against the tile, the only sound in the stillness. "Mom." The second the word left my mouth, the lights flickered. The nurse turned her head. Too fast, too sharp. Her eyes weren't right. Too wide, too dark. A tear slid down her cheek, but her expression didn't change. Then she smiled. Not a normal smile. A stretched, unnatural grin. My breath caught. Devin grabbed my arm. "We need to go." I took a slow step back. The nurse didn't blink, didn't move, just smiled. Then, as the lights flickered again, she was gone. The chair sat empty. No sound. No footsteps. Just gone. We ran. Down the hall, past the empty rooms. My pulse pounded in my ears. We reached room 209. The door was slightly open. I hesitated, then pushed it wider. Mark sat inside. His clothes were torn, his face pale, his hands shaking as he rocked back and forth on the hospital bed. His wide, sunken eyes snapped to mine. "Mark," I said carefully, stepping inside. "It's Ethan." We spoke on the phone. His breath hitched. "You shouldn't have come." Devin glanced down the hallway behind us. "Yeah, we're getting that vibe." I moved closer. "Mark, what's happening?" His lips trembled. "They erase you." A cold weight settled in my gut. "Who?" His whole body shuddered. I don't know what they are. Shadows. Figures. If you see them, they see you. And if they see you," his voice cracked, "they take you." His eyes darted to the door. "You forget. Everyone forgets. No records. No memories. Like you were never born." I thought about the missing EMTs, the delivery driver, the disappearing footprints, the emergency alerts. "Why doesn't anyone talk about it?" Devin asked. Mark squeezed his hands into fists. "They can't. They don't remember. Once someone's gone, it's like their existence is erased." I swallowed hard. "Then why do we remember?" His breath hitched. Then softly, "Because you're next." A chill rolled down my spine. Mark suddenly stiffened. His breath went ragged. His head twitched violently, like he was resisting something unseen. Then he turned to me, his mouth opening wider, too wide, and in a voice that was not his, he whispered, "They're already here." The lights flickered. I grabbed Devin and ran. The hospital halls stretched endlessly as we sprinted for the exit. The air felt thick, wrong, like the walls were closing in. The automatic doors loomed ahead, our way out. Then the lights went out completely. The emergency backup hummed to life, casting everything in a weak red glow. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the floor. Footsteps echoed behind us, not running, walking, slow, deliberate. I risked a glance over my shoulder. A mistake. Figures stood at the end of the hallway, tall, still, featureless, watching. Devin yanked the door handle, locked. "No, no, no." The figures took a step forward. The red emergency lights flickered. Then the emergency alert buzzed in my pocket. I yanked out my phone. "If you are outside at dusk, do not move. Do not speak. Do not look at them." Devin was breathing hard. "Ethan, don't move." I forced myself to stand still. The figures moved closer. Devin whimpered but didn't move. The power surged back on, and the hallway was empty. We stumbled out of the hospital, gasping, got into the ambulance, drove. Didn't speak until we were miles away. Then Devin whispered, "We need to leave town." I checked my phone. Another emergency alert. "It is too late to leave." I looked up. At the end of the road, barely visible in the dimming light, they were waiting. The emergency alert sat on my phone screen, glowing like a death sentence. It is too late to leave. Devin gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. His breathing was ragged, panicked. We have to try. His voice cracked. We have to. I wanted to agree. I wanted to gun it down the road, past the figures in the distance, past the empty streets, past this godforsaken town. But the truth settled like a stone in my gut. It wouldn't work. If they could erase people, alter records, manipulate the world like this, they weren't going to let us leave. And deep down, I knew no one ever left this town. I swallowed hard. Devin, stop the ambulance. He stared at me like I was insane. Are you out of your damn mind? Just stop. Trust me. His breath came fast, his pulse hammering in his throat. But he nodded. Slowly, reluctantly, he let the ambulance coast to a stop. The road ahead stretched into the dusk. The sky was painted in dark purples and deep oranges, danger colors now. At the very edge of the fading light, the figures stood motionless. I checked my phone. No new alert, just the same ominous warning. I exhaled. We're not leaving. Devin let out a choked, bitter laugh. So what? We just sit here and wait to get erased? No, I glanced at him. We figure this out. We turned back, not because we wanted to, not because it felt safe, but because there was no other choice. The town was dead silent. No cars, no people, just empty houses, darkened windows, and the faint hum of streetlights flickering on. Devin drove slowly, his hands tense on the wheel. Where are we going? I thought about what Mark said. You forget. Everyone forgets. No records, no memories. Like you were never born. And yet we remembered. Devin, me, Mark. Why were we different? I checked my phone again, scrolling through old messages, old call logs. I searched for my mom's number. It wasn't there. My stomach twisted. My photos, my saved contacts, they were missing people. Like gaps in a puzzle, whole pieces of my life had been removed. I checked my driver's license next, issued in this town. I tried to think back. How long had I lived here? But the memories were blurry, like something had been rewritten. I sucked in a slow breath. Devin, do you remember moving here? He blinked. What? Like, do you remember choosing to come here? Picking out an apartment, signing a lease? Devin opened his mouth. Shut it. His face paled. I don't know, he admitted. I just was here. His grip on the wheel tightened. I remember my life. I remember before. But he shook his head. I don't remember coming here. A chill crawled down my spine. I tried to remember my first day in this town. Nothing. No moving trucks. No house hunting. No first introductions to the neighborhood. Just waking up one day already here. Like we had always been here. Like we had never been anywhere else. Devin met my eyes, his throat bobbing. What the hell is this place? I didn't have an answer. We pulled up to the police station. It was empty. No officers. No patrol cars. Just open desks, abandoned paperwork, and the quiet hum of a flickering overhead light. Devin swallowed hard. You think they were erased? I nodded slowly. I scanned the room, my eyes landing on the security monitors. The screen flickered, showing different street angles. Empty sidewalks, vacant intersections, the occasional passing headlights. Then movement, a figure, standing motionless at a crosswalk, barely visible in the dim streetlight. Then another, and another. They weren't walking, just appearing. Their shapes flickered in and out, shifting places without moving. My skin crawled. They're spreading. My voice came out hoarse. Devin exhaled shakily. So what do we do? I hesitated, staring at the monitors. Then an idea hit me. There's got to be records here. Something they haven't erased yet. Maybe files, reports, anything that could tell us what the hell was happening. I started digging through desks, opening drawers, flipping through paperwork. Devin did the same. And then Ethan, his voice was tight. I turned. He held up a missing persons file. The name on it made my blood run cold. My heart stuttered. Devin pulled out another file. His name. I grabbed the stack, flipping through them. More names, more files, people I didn't know, people I didn't remember, all of them missing, except they weren't. They were here. I forced myself to read the details. Each report had a strange note attached. No known history prior to arrival in town. No family records. No social security trace, like we had appeared out of nowhere, like we had never existed before this place. A cold realization settled in my chest. We weren't just brought here, I whispered. We were made here. Devon's hands trembled. What are you saying? I licked my dry lips. We're not supposed to exist outside this town. Devon went still. That's why no one leaves, I continued. That's why no one remembers moving here. Why the second people disappear, there's no trace of them. No records. No memories. I turned the file toward him. Ethan Reed missing. No known prior records. I met his eyes. We're not real outside of this town. Devon staggered back, his breathing shallow. No, that's not possible. I remember my life. I remember, but his voice wavered, because now that we were looking, it was slipping away. The more we thought about our past, the fuzzier it became. Our minds weren't meant to remember. We had been placed here, and something was watching us. I checked my phone. Another emergency alert. They are watching. Do not attempt to leave. I lifted my gaze to the station's security monitors. Outside, in the dimly lit parking lot, they were waiting. The security monitor flickered. The figures stood outside the station, motionless, watching. I tore my gaze away, my chest tight with panic. Devon was still clutching his missing persons file, his breath ragged. We need to go, I whispered. He shook his head, eyes wild. Go where, Ethan? There's nowhere to go. I didn't have an answer, because he was right. The town wasn't safe. The streets weren't safe, and now, neither was the station. A soft tap echoed through the room, then another, the sound of knuckles against glass. I turned slowly. One of the figures stood outside the front door. His face was featureless, a smooth, empty void where eyes and a mouth should have been. It lifted a pale, unnatural hand and knocked again. Tap, tap, tap. I took a slow step back, pulse hammering. They've never knocked before? Devon murmured, voice barely audible. No, they hadn't. They just appeared. Watched. Taken. But now, they were doing something different. Something worse. They were trying to get in. I grabbed Devon's arm. Back room. Now. We scrambled through the station, weaving past empty desks and flickering computer screens. My hands were slick with sweat as I shoved open the door to the archives room and locked it behind us. The air was thick with dust. Rows of metal filing cabinets loomed around us. The single overhead light buzzed faintly, barely illuminating the cramped space. Devon was shaking. We're trapped. I ignored him and started rifling through the cabinets. There has to be something here. Reports, logs, anything. I yanked open drawer after drawer, flipping through hundreds of missing persons files. Each one was stamped with the same cryptic note. No prior history. No external records, just like ours. Devon ran a trembling hand through his hair. This isn't just us. This isn't just a few people. This is everyone. A lump formed in my throat. Hundreds of names, thousands, all of them created here. People who never existed outside of this town. And the ones who had vanished, they weren't missing. They were erased. A sudden shuffling sound made us both freeze. Not from the door, from inside the room. I turned slowly. The cabinet in the farthest corner was open. I knew I hadn't touched it. The air felt wrong, heavy. Then a whisper, so soft I almost didn't hear it. Help me. My stomach plummeted. Devon went rigid. His breath hitched. Did you? I nodded, throat dry. The voice had come from the open cabinet. I hesitated, then stepped closer. Dust swirled in the dim light as I reached for the metal handle. My fingers trembled as I gripped the edge and pulled it open all the way. Inside was a person, curled in the fetal position, crammed into the tight space like a forgotten doll. A woman, pale, gone. Her long, stringy hair draped over her face, obscuring her features. Her arms were wrapped around herself, fingers clutching at her own skin. Devon stumbled back with a choked noise. What the hell? The woman's head twitched. Then, slowly, she lifted her face toward me, and I recognized her. My breath left my lungs. Anna, it was impossible. Anna was an EMT, my partner. We'd worked together for years, except I hadn't seen her in days, hadn't thought about her in days, like she'd been wiped from my mind, like she had vanished. Her sunken eyes locked onto mine. Ethan. Her voice was barely a whisper, cracked and dry. A lump formed in my throat. What happened to you? She let out a shuddering breath. They tried to take me, she rasped. But I fought it. Her fingers dug into her arms, nails scraping against bone. I held on. I held on too long. A creeping dread coiled in my stomach. She shouldn't be here. None of this made sense. Anna had been gone. She should have been erased. But somehow she wasn't. I crouched beside her. Anna, we need to get out of here. Come with us. Her lips trembled. Then she whispered, I can't. A distant knock echoed through the building. Louder this time. More of them. Anna flinched, pressing herself deeper into the cabinet. They know I'm here. They've been looking for me. Devin cursed under his breath. Ethan, we have to move. I hesitated, but Anna shook her head. You can't help me, she said, voice hollow. I'm already half gone. Her gaze turned distant. Soon you will be too. The knocking grew louder. The figures weren't just waiting anymore. They were getting in. A metallic creak filled the air. I turned just in time to see the door handle twisting. Devin grabbed my arm, yanking me away. Ethan, now? The door burst open. Darkness rushed in. I barely had time to react before everything flickered. The light, the walls, reality itself. A surge of static filled my head. My vision blurred, my limbs going weak as a suffocating pressure wrapped around my chest. Felt like something was pulling me away, pulling me out of existence. Devin's voice cut through the haze, distant, panicked. Ethan, fight it. I tried. I clawed at my mind, trying to hold on to my thoughts, my name, my existence. And for a moment I was winning, but then I heard it, a voice, soft, familiar. It's okay, Ethan. Just let go. I gasped, because I knew that voice. I knew it, but I couldn't place it, like it had been erased from me long ago. The darkness tightened around me, and for the first time, I felt myself slipping. A deafening ringing filled my ears. Couldn't see, couldn't move. I was drifting, floating, like something had untethered me from my own body. Devin's voice was distant, like it was coming from the other side of a thick wall. Ethan, stay with me. Don't let go. I tried to answer, tried to grab onto something, anything, but the voice from the darkness returned. Soft, familiar. It's okay, Ethan. Just let go. A whisper, but it filled my entire mind. I knew that voice. I knew it, but every time I tried to grasp onto the memory, it slipped away like mist between my fingers. The world flickered again, and for a split second I was somewhere else. Not the police station, not the archives, somewhere a vast, empty place without color, without sound, a void. And in that void they were waiting, the figures, standing still, faces smooth and featureless, their bodies stretching into the nothingness like they were part of it, like they had never been anything else. The closest one tilted its head. I should have been afraid, but I wasn't, because for the first time something felt right, like I belonged here, like I had never belonged anywhere else. My limbs relaxed. Maybe I had been fighting for nothing. Maybe this was where I was supposed to. A hand gripped my wrist, hard, yanking me back. Suddenly, my lungs burned. My vision swam. Reality lurched. I was back in the police station. Devin was holding on to me, his eyes wide with terror. He had me by the wrist, dragging me backward. Ethan, fight it, he gasped. My body felt wrong, like I had been stretched, pulled apart at the seams. I wasn't all there. Anna was still curled in the cabinet, watching with hollow eyes. They almost had you, she whispered. I swallowed hard. I looked down at my own hands. For a horrifying second, they weren't solid. They were flickering, like a bad signal on an old TV, like I was already half gone. Devin didn't let go of me. His grip was iron tight. We need to move, he said. Right now. I forced myself to nod. I turned to Anna. Come with us. She hesitated, and for the first time I saw fear in her eyes. Not fear of the things outside, fear of leaving. I don't know if I can. Her voice cracked. Devin swore. Then try. She swallowed hard. Then, slowly, she crawled out of the cabinet. Her movements were stiff, unnatural, like she hadn't used her body in days. But she was moving. That was all that mattered. The knocking at the front of the station had stopped. The silence was worse, because now we knew they were already inside. We crept through the dim hallway, sticking close together. Devin had his phone light up, barely illuminating the space ahead. The walls felt off, like they weren't solid anymore, like the station itself was starting to blur. I tried not to think about it. We reached the back exit. Devin pressed his ear against the door, held up a hand, listened. Silence. Then he nodded. We pushed through, stepping out into the night. The air was too still. The streets were empty, but the silence wasn't comforting. It was wrong, like the entire town was holding its breath. "We go for the ambulance," Devin murmured. I nodded. Anna hesitated, her body trembling. She was looking at the sky. At first, I didn't understand, but then I followed her gaze, and my breath hitched. The sky wasn't right. The stars were gone. The moon was missing, just an empty black void, like the world beyond the town had already ceased to exist. A sick feeling churned in my stomach. We weren't just fighting to stay alive. We were fighting to stay real. "We move now." Devin took the lead, sprinting across the parking lot. Anna and I followed. The ambulance was still there, its red and white paint glowing under the streetlights. But as we got closer, something changed. The lights overhead flickered. The street distorted, like heat waves off asphalt. And in the blink of an eye, the ambulance was gone. Anna let out a sharp, strangled noise. Devin stumbled to a halt. No. It wasn't stolen. It wasn't towed. It had been erased, just like people, just like memories, just like the sky. Devin turned in a frantic circle. We need another plan." Anna collapsed onto the pavement. Her hands were in her hair, her shoulders shaking. "It's too late," I clenched my jaw. "No, we're still here." Anna lifted her head. Her eyes were hollow. "For now," she whispered. The streetlights buzzed overhead. The world around us shuddered. And then, from the far end of the street, we saw them, dozens of figures, standing still, watching, waiting. Devin went rigid. "Ethan," I didn't respond, couldn't, because the figures weren't just watching us. They were wearing our faces. Devin, me, Anna, copies of us, standing in the dim glow of the flickering streetlights, their smooth, featureless faces twisting, like they were almost ready to become us. Anna let out a broken breath. "That's what happens," she whispered. "That's what happens when you fade." I took a slow step back. Devin grabbed my arm. "We're not done yet," he said, his voice firm, but I could feel it. The way the ground wasn't quite solid anymore. The way the town itself was shifting. The way my own fingers were still flickering at the edges. We weren't going to be able to run forever, because we weren't just being hunted. We were being replaced. And the moment we let go, they would take our places. The figures took a step forward, and I knew this was our last chance to run, to fight, to exist, before we became just another missing file in a forgotten cabinet. Before we became them, the figures stood in perfect stillness. Devin, Anna, me, copies of us, pale and featureless. Not quite formed yet, but they were close, too close. A streetlight flickered overhead, its buzz slicing through the dead silence. The air itself felt wrong, too thick, too heavy, too still, like reality was collapsing around us, like we were running out of time. Devin's grip on my arm tightened. "Ethan," I tore my eyes away from the copies. His face was pale, lips tight. "We need to move. Now." Anna was still frozen on the pavement, breathing hard. "They're replacing us," she whispered. "They're taking our places." I swallowed hard. "Then we don't give them the chance." The street stretched ahead of us. No cars, no people, just darkened houses and flickering streetlights. And at the very end, the old fire station, still standing, still real. "For now, run," I said. Devin grabbed Anna's wrist and yanked her up. She gasped, but didn't resist. Then we ran. The chase. The pavement felt unstable under my feet, like it wasn't quite solid anymore. Like the town itself was dissolving. I didn't dare look back. I could hear them, their footsteps, not hurried, not frantic, just steady. A soundless, measured pursuit, like they knew we wouldn't outrun them. Anna stumbled. Devin yanked her forward. "Keep moving," I gasped. I didn't know what we'd do when we got to the fire station, but we didn't have a choice. The town was closing in. The streets fading, buildings flickered, distorted, like they were being erased, just like the ambulance, like they had never been there to begin with. My chest burned. My legs ached, but we kept running. And then Anna screamed. I turned. She wasn't behind me anymore. She was standing still, not by choice. Her feet were sinking into the pavement, like the ground had turned to quicksand beneath her. "No!" Devin lunged, grabbing her arm, but she was being pulled down, vanishing inch by inch. Her eyes widened in horror. "I can't," she gasped. "I can't move." I grabbed her other arm, pulled. Her body jerked upward just for a second, but then the ground clamped down harder. The pavement rose over her ankles, her calves. She let out a broken, desperate cry. "No, no, no." Her fingers dug into my wrist. Then a new voice, soft, calm, from behind me. "Let go, Ethan. It's okay." I froze because I knew that voice. It was mine. I turned my head and my stomach dropped. The copy of me was standing just a few feet away, watching, waiting, this blank, unfinished face shifting, filling in, taking shape, becoming me. It reached out a hand, perfect copy of mine. "It's okay," it said again. "Just let go." My breath came in ragged gasps. I felt it, the pull, the unnatural pressure inside my skull, something forcing me to forget, to slip away, to let it take my place. Anna's fingers tensed around my wrist. She was up to her knees now. The pavement was pulling her under. I turned back to her. I had to make a choice. Right now, fight or fade. I clenched my teeth and yanked her with everything I had. Breaking free, Anna screamed. The pavement stretched like something unnatural, like it was trying to keep her. Then, with a horrible tearing sound, she came free. We stumbled back. She gasped for air, trembling. Her legs were covered in darkness. Not just shadows, not just dirt, something else. Something that wasn't supposed to be here. Crawled up her skin, spreading, like the town had left its mark, like it had almost succeeded in making her part of it. Anna was sobbing, but we didn't have time to stop. The copies were still watching. Their faces were almost formed now, almost us. I grabbed her hand and kept running. The fire station was so close now. Just a few more steps. Devin slammed into the doors. They burst open. We tumbled inside. And then, silence. The warning. The fire station was abandoned. Dust covered the floors. The air smelled stale, but it felt different, more real than the streets outside. Anna collapsed against the wall, still shaking. Devin locked the door behind us. Then he turned to me, his face pale. "They almost got us," he whispered. I nodded. I didn't have words, because I knew what would have happened. I felt it, the slow unraveling, the way reality had started to slip, the way my own mind had started to accept it, the way my copy had been waiting, ready to take my place. I took a shaky breath. Then my eyes landed on the far wall, on the bulletin board. I walked toward it, heart hammering. Pinned to the board were dozens of papers, faded, old, emergency alerts, hundreds of them. Some we had seen before, but others were warnings we had never heard. My blood ran cold as I read them, one by one. Emergency alert. Do not answer if they knock. Emergency alert. Do not look at your reflection after midnight. Emergency alert. If you hear someone call your name, ignore it. And at the very bottom, one final message, scrawled in shaking handwriting, like it had been written in a hurry. Do not trust yourself. I stepped back, my stomach twisting. Devin swallowed hard. Anna was staring at the wall, silent. No one spoke, because we understood. This wasn't just happening now. It had been happening for years. The town wasn't just fading. It was being rewritten, and we had no idea how much of it was even real anymore. I took a slow, unsteady breath, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was real either. The fire station was silent. Dust floated in the pale, flickering light. Anna sat against the wall, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the emergency alerts pinned to the board. Devin stood beside me, his breathing ragged, his hands trembling, and I couldn't look away from that final message. Do not trust yourself. It was written in thick, uneven strokes. The ink smudged as if someone had scribbled it down in a blind panic. Something about it gnawed at me, because the longer I stared, the more familiar it felt, like I had seen it before, or worse, like I had written it. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to turn away. We need answers, I muttered. Devin dragged a hand down his face. And where the hell are we supposed to get them? I didn't know, but I did know one thing. The town wasn't just disappearing. It was being replaced, erased, rewritten, and whatever had been here before, whatever the world was trying to cover up, we weren't supposed to remember it. Anna's voice was hoarse. What if we already forgot something? Devin and I turned toward her. She was still staring at the board, at all the emergency alerts, all the warnings we hadn't heard before. What if we used to know the truth? She whispered. What if they already took it from us? Her words sent a shiver down my spine, because she was right. What if the version of reality we knew, our entire lives, had already been altered? A forgotten secret. I forced myself to move. The fire station had an upstairs office, a command center of sorts. If there was anything left, it would be there. Devin caught my eye and nodded. We climbed the stairs. Each step groaned under our weight, the air thick with dust. At the top, we found a small, windowless room, a desk, a file cabinet, and on the desk, a single journal. Its cover was cracked with age, its pages yellowed. The name on the front was faded, barely legible, but I could still make it out. Deputy Paul Weston. Devin exhaled sharply. I know that name, so did I. Weston had been missing for over a decade, disappeared without a trace. Like so many others, a sick feeling twisted in my gut as I opened the journal. The first few pages were normal. Routine logs, notes about shifts, petty crimes. Then the handwriting changed. The letters grew uneven, desperate. The last real entry was dated 10 years ago, and it said one thing: they took my partner first. I swallowed hard and kept reading. I don't remember when it started. I don't even know if I was supposed to notice. First, it was little things. Someone forgetting a conversation we had the day before. Streets that felt different somehow. Then bigger things. People going missing, not vanishing into thin air. No, just being erased, like they were never there at all. My pulse pounded. The entry continued. I asked the chief about it once. He just looked at me like I was crazy, said I needed sleep. That's when I realized he didn't remember either. A chill ran through me. Weston had noticed. He had seen what was happening, just like us. But what had happened to him? I flipped to the final entry, and when I saw it, my blood ran cold, because it wasn't written in ink. It was scratched into the paper, like he had been in a hurry or in pain. If you're reading this, it's already too late. Don't trust yourself. Don't let them finish taking your place. A metallic taste filled my mouth. I turned the book around, showed it to Devin and Anna. Anna's face was pale. Devin clenched his jaw. Jesus Christ. My hands were trembling. I shut the book. Weston had been here, and now he was gone. Or worse, something else had taken his place. A way out. Devin straightened. We need to get out of town. I almost laughed. And go where? The highway. His voice was firm. We find a car. Get the hell out. We can't fight this, Ethan. We don't even know what this is. I hesitated, because a part of me, the rational part, agreed. But another part one couldn't explain, was screaming at me that it wouldn't work. Because what if the town was all that was left? What if the rest of the world was already gone? Anna wiped at her face. We have to try. I looked down at the journal, at Weston's final warning. Something about it still bothered me. Don't trust yourself. I clenched my teeth. The copies outside, the ones with our faces, they were waiting. They were almost finished. We were running out of time. I shoved the journal into my jacket. Fine, I said. We try the highway. Devin exhaled in relief. Let's move. We hurried back down the stairs, through the station, back into the night, the vanishing road. The town was quieter than before. Too quiet. The streetlights buzzed weakly, flickering like they were struggling to stay on. The air smelled wrong, not like smoke or rot, just empty, like the town wasn't just disappearing. It was hollowing out. I forced myself to focus. The highway was only a few miles ahead. If we could just… Devin stopped dead in his tracks. I crashed into him. Devin, what? Then I saw it. My breath caught in my throat. The road ahead of us was gone. Not blocked, not destroyed, gone. Like someone had erased it from existence. The pavement just ended, and beyond it was nothing. A vast, empty void. No sky, no stars, just blackness stretching forever. Devin took a step back, shaking his head. No, Anna made a choked sound. I felt my own breath quicken. The town wasn't part of the world anymore. It was an island, a trap, and there was no way out. Then a sound, not from the void, from behind us. Slow, measured footsteps, getting closer. Devin turned first, and his face went bloodless. Anna whimpered. I turned last, and my heart stopped. There, standing in the street, was us, perfect, fully formed, and smiling. The takeover was complete, and we were already gone. They stood in front of us, perfect copies. Their faces, our faces, were complete now. Not pale, not blank. Identical. The way Devin's copy tilted its head. The way Anna's copy stood with one foot slightly turned inward, just like she always did when she was nervous. The way my copy's hand twitched at its side. The same nervous tick I had since childhood. They weren't just imitations. They were us. And that meant we weren't supposed to exist anymore. The impossible standoff. The three of us stood frozen at the edge of the void. Devin was breathing hard, his fists clenched. Anna's face was streaked with silent tears. And me, I was paralyzed, because I knew how this would end. We weren't escaping. The town was already gone, and we were about to go with it. Devin was the first to move. Get back, he hissed, stepping in front of Anna. His copy did the same. It didn't look confused. It didn't hesitate. It knew exactly what Devin was about to do, because it thought just like him. My stomach twisted. Devin lunged. His copy moved at the same time. A blur of motion, a dull, wet crack. Devin staggered back, choking. His copy had struck first, had known exactly where to hit. He collapsed to his knees. Anna screamed. I grabbed her arm, pulling her back. Devin's copy crouched beside him, its face unreadable, like it felt nothing, like it was checking its work. And then Devin stopped moving. His copy slowly stood, and when it looked at me, I felt it. Something inside me was unraveling. Like my own existence was slipping, because he wasn't Devin anymore. He never had been. He had always been the copy. And Devin, the real Devin, had already been erased. A mind not my own. Anna's breathing was ragged. Ethan, we have to go. But where? The town was gone. The road was gone. Everything was gone. The only things left were us. And them. I turned to my own copy. It was watching me, not smiling, not gloating, just waiting, because it knew something I didn't. A memory, a realization surfaced in my head. What if I was wrong? What if the copies weren't replacing us? What if we were the copies? The thought slammed into me with sickening weight. The emergency alerts, the disappearing buildings, the vanishing streets. What if the world wasn't erasing us? What if it was fixing itself? Anna grabbed my sleeve, shaking her head, her voice breaking. No, don't think like that. But I had to. What if Weston had been right? What if we had already been replaced and just hadn't realized it yet? What if we were the imperfect versions, the ones that weren't supposed to exist? What if we were? Anna let out a choked sound. Her grip loosened, and when I looked down, she was fading, not disappearing, not being pulled into the void, just dissolving. Her hands were vanishing at the fingertips, the rest of her following piece by piece. Her eyes met mine, wide and terrified. I don't want to go, she whispered, but I couldn't save her. She wasn't real. Neither was I. I felt it now, like something inside me was unraveling, unthreading, dismantling, and it wasn't painful. It wasn't violent. It was peaceful, like waking up from a dream, or remembering something I had forgotten long ago. Anna's lips parted, like she wanted to say something else, but then she was gone. No body, no trace, nothing, just an empty space where she had been standing. like she had never been there at all. The last to fade. The silence pressed in around me. My knees buckled. I sank to the pavement, my fingers trembling. My breath came slower, shallower, because I was fading too. Not suddenly, not all at once, just bit by bit, like reality itself was taking me apart, like I was never supposed to exist in the first place. My copy, the real me, knelt in front of me, and this time when it spoke, its voice was mine, calm, understanding. "It's okay," it said. "You can let go now." I felt my vision blur, felt my hands vanish, felt my mind soften, and for the first time I wasn't afraid, because I knew I had never been real, not truly, just a broken, incomplete version, a mistake, one that the world had finally corrected. I closed my eyes, breathed out one last time, and let myself fade. Emergency alert. System restored. The town was quiet, whole again. The streets were solid. The sky was clear. A man stood on the sidewalk, stretching his arms with a quiet sigh. His eyes scanned the street. No fear, no confusion, just calm. He adjusted his jacket and turned, walking toward his home. And as he passed a shop window, his reflection looked back at him. Perfect, flawless copy, exactly as it should be.